कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे
Hari Om. Let's get started.
सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावतीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति। गीता ध्यानम्। ॐ पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्धधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणी। नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे पुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्रा येन त्वया भारततल्यपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयप्रदीपः प्रपन्नपारिजाताय रुद्रवैत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत्। वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम्। भीष्मद्रोणतटा जयद्रथजला गान्धारनीलोत्पला शल्यग्राहवती कृपेण वहनी कर्णेन वेलाकुला अश्वत्थामविकर्णघोरमकरा दुर्योधनावर्तिनी सोत्तीर्णा खलु पाण्डवैरननदी कैवर्तककेशवः पाराशर्यवचः सरोजममलं गीतार्थगन्धोत्कटम् नानाख्यानककेसरं हरिकथा सम्बोधनाभूदितम्। लोके सज्जनषट्परैरहरहः पीयमानं मुदा भूयाद्भारतपङ्कजं कलिमलप्रध्वंसि न श्रेयसे। मूकं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवम् यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदे गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यान्तं न विदुः सुरासुरगणा देवाय तस्मै नमः देवाय तस्मै नमः देवाय तस्मै नमः
Hari Om. So we saw last time that Bhagavan glorifies the wisdom that he shared with Arjuna by saying that he gave the same wisdom to Vivaswan, and Vivaswan is the sun god, and that then Vivaswan further gave it to his son Manu, and from Manu it got disseminated through generations to the royal sages via Ikshvaku, who was the first king, the first royal sage. And then Bhagavan says that this knowledge is imperishable, avyayam, and has passed through generations, parampara praptam, in an excellent manner. Bhagavan keeps emphasizing on doing whatever you do with samachara, with excellence. And he says, proktavan, which means in an excellent manner, it was passed through generations. And then he says that in the course of time, and a long time, like we saw last time, we went through, the science of time, long time, kalena mahata, through time, through the various yogas, this yoga got lost. Sa yogo nashtaha. The degradation of human society that happens through the yogas, that caused for this yoga to get lost because it was received by people who were not fit to receive it and transmitted by the same people who were unfit to transmit it further. And then he says, now Arjuna, when this parampara is broken, when this yoga has got lost, I am sharing it again with you. And this is a supreme secret. Uttamam rahasyam. And why am I sharing this supreme secret with you? Because bhaktosmi cha sakha. You are my bhakta, my devotee, as also my friend, my sakha. And this leads to Arjuna asking his next question, which lays the foundation for Bhagavan to share the Avatara Rahasya. This was the last verse that we covered in the last satsang. We will repeat this once again today. Let's repeat verse 4.6.
Ajopi sannavyayatma
Ajopi sannavyayatma
bhutanamishvaropi sanna
bhutanamishvaropi san
prakritim swamadhisthaya
prakritim swamadhisthaya
sambhavamyatma mayaya
sambhavamyatma mayaya
ajopi sannavyayatma bhutanamishvaropi sanna prakritim swamadhisthaya sambhavamyatma mayaya.
Ajah san api avyayatma san api. So even though there is no birth nor there is any death for me, yet I take a physical form and I incarnate as the Lord of all beings. Bhutanam Ishvaropi Sanna. And how do I do that? I employ my own nature, Adhisthaya Swam Prakritim. Employing my own nature, I am born, Sambhavami, Atma Mayaya, by my own free will. So avatar in Sanskrit means descent. Descent like as in coming down. In Sanatana Dharma, it is the material appearance or incarnation or embodiment of a deity, especially Bhagwan Lord Vishnu on earth. When Bhagwan becomes available at the level of comprehension of normal people, coming down from the highest state of formlessness to a form that is cognizable by human beings, understandable to human beings. From a Nirguna avatara, from a Nirguna state, that is, which is outside the realm of the three gunas, to a Saguna state, which is perceivable within the realm of the three gunas. The three gunas, if you recollect, are Sattva, Rajasic and Tamasic. And something which is devoid of these three gunas to something which is perceivable by these three gunas, that kind of a descent. And when Bhagavan descends as an avatara, he assumes a physical form that is just like human beings. He has a body, he has a mind, and he has an intellect. And he experiences the three gunas, the Sattvic guna, the Rajasic guna, and the Tamasic guna, as we all do. As we all experience, he experiences them. And assuming the form and experiencing all the gunas, the avatara expresses only in the Sattvic guna. And by expressing only with the Sattvic guna, thus Bhagavan sets an ideal for all human beings to follow. And how does he do all of this? He says, I am born, Sambhavami, by my own free will, Atma Mayaya, employing Adhishtaya, my own nature, Swam Prakriti. Atma Mayaya means through my own Maya is Atma Mayaya. Bhagavan, as we have seen before, is all-knowing, all-controlling. We went through the various features and the virtues of Bhagavan. He knows what is good for all his creations. He knows what is not good for all his creations. And with this knowledge, he applies his own free will, because when he sees that there is deterioration happening among his creations, and that is not good, he understands that that is not good, he employs his own free will to take physical form. And with that physical form, he works amongst human beings. And during the course of his avatara, he established himself as the Lord of all beings, without abandoning his essential qualities. His essential nirguna qualities remain without abandoning them, that include being free of sin, being free of gunas. He performs his duties as avatara and as Bhagavan, both of those. And we have seen that through his avatars. As Lord Narasimha, he performed his avatara duty of destroying Hiranyakashipu. His purpose of avatara descending at that time was the destruction of Hiranyakashipu, who had become a complete, he was not only ruling over all three worlds, but he was tormenting everybody. And he had proclaimed himself as God. And that would be disastrous to creation. So his avatara duty was to destroy Hiranyakashipu. And then when Bhagavan was in that duty, when he had completed his avatara duty, he, as we all know, as Lord Narasimha, he was half lion and half human being. And that time he was in his complete rage, unbelievable crescendo of Rajasic rage as the avatara. But then, and everyone was completely scared, because at that level of anger, Bhagavan in a flash could destroy by himself his own creation. And everybody started pleading with him, nothing worked. Finally, Prahalada pleaded with him. And performing his duty as Bhagavan, the Lord listened to his bhakta. He obeyed his bhakta. And he calmed down, thereby allowing continuity to happen. As Vamana Avatara, he assumed the form of an ordinary Brahman. and sought benevolence. Again, needs to express himself amongst the gunas. Sought benevolence from the all-giving emperor, Mahabali. And as Bhagavan, he assumed a gigantic, immensely gigantic form to take over both the lokas that were ruled by Mahabali. And then by his third step, Mahabali himself, he took over. As Rama Avatara, he lived a life of an ordinary prince. And not just a prince when he was a prince as an ordinary prince, but also a prince turned ascetic. He had to become an ascetic and went through various trials in his life, trials and tribulations, and lived through them as any other ordinary human being do, setting the example of the right way of living life. And when he was to cross the ocean with the army, and that was becoming impossible, at that time he practiced a yajna. Even that did not lead a result. And then he assumed his role, his duty as Bhagavan, and he commanded the ocean god to create a bridge. And then in Mahabharata, as Sri Krishna, as we are all listening to him, having taken avatara in Dwapara Yuga. So, like we said, every yuga, the ethical and the moral values, the dharmic values are diminishing. They are decaying. And in Dwapara Yuga, they had decayed substantially. Definitely better than what we see now in Kali Yuga, but substantially. And Mahabharata was towards the end of the Dwapara Yuga. So there was immense decay at that time. And at that time, he had to live as human, as a human being among humans. So when you see this, when you read the story of Sri Krishna, he did a lot of things that normal human beings would do. And living among human beings, behaving like them, and then whenever required, as Bhagavan, demonstrating superhuman as well as godly powers. To do what? To inculcate belief in people. As a young child, lifting the Govardhan mountain with his little finger, to finally in the Bhagavad Gita, where he shows his Vishwarupa, which we will also study about. So he went through a normal ordinary life, but as and when required through his avatara, through that period of his avatara, because of his being in the Dwapara Yuga, he had to demonstrate godly powers. In fact, during the course of his life, he demonstrated his godly powers about 5 times. The first one was when, as a baby, he had swallowed mud, and Ma Yashoda had got very angry with him. And he said, "No, I have not swallowed any mud." And she said, "Open your mouth." And the earth that he had swallowed to her appeared as the entire universe. That's what she saw when he opened his mouth, that small little baby. And then Jarasandh, he had kidnapped and imprisoned 100 kings. And when Yudhishthira was supposed to perform the Ashwamedha Yagna and declare himself as the ruler of the environment of the earth at that time, whatever was within his purview, at that time Jarasandha was opposing him, and not only that, he had kidnapped and imprisoned 100 kings. And Bhima, under the guidance of Krishna, defeated and killed Jarasandha and set the 100 kings free. And at that time, Sri Krishna showed his Chaturbhuja form, the 4-armed form, where he has the lotus, the conch shell, the Sudarshana Chakra, and the mace, Gadha, all 4 of them. Similarly, he also showed his Chaturbhuja form to sage Muchukunda, when sage Muchukunda helped him in one of his tasks. And of course, in the Mahabharata, as a peace emissary, just before the war was about to begin, when all other avenues were covered and all actions taken, and nothing could convince Duryodhana, Sri Krishna himself went to Duryodhana Sabha at Hastinapura, to his darbar, to plead for peace. And he reasoned out to the extent of saying that you please give Pandavas only 5 huts, that's more than enough. But Duryodhana said, I will not even give them one land equal to a pin of the top of the needle. Even that I will not give. And then Duryodhana ordered the capture of Sri Krishna. Typically, normally, ethically, an emissary is supposed to be an emissary. Even in today's world, diplomatic rights are rights which only emissaries of other nations enjoy. But at that time, Duryodhana ordered the capture of Sri Krishna. And with the goal or with the objective of getting Duryodhana to be actually scared of what was coming for him, and also for Dhritarashtra to see, that what is your son doing and please don't allow him to do that. One last hope, Sri Krishna showed his Virat Rupa. And that everyone, especially Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra, they saw all the armies of the entire Pandava army, the army from Sri Krishna's kingdom, the Yadava army, all of that in the full mighty power. But Duryodhana called that a magic, and we know what happened. Ultimately, his doom. And Dhritarashtra, of course, had no power to control his son. And then finally, when Arjuna was deluded and Bhagavan Sri Krishna preached him the Bhagavad Gita, and through the Bhagavad Gita, this knowledge, this wisdom that he had shared with the sun god, at that time he showed his Vishwarupa. And in the Vishwarupa, Arjuna saw all aspects of the Lord, of creation, of the Lord, of himself, everything, the good, the bad, everything. And after a few seconds of seeing that, he could not behold it any longer. He had to plead with Sri Krishna to come back to his normal form. We will read that in the Bhagavad Gita itself. So, Bhagavan, through his various avatars, performed all of these are the duties that he performed. Duty at the level of an avatara and duty at the level of Bhagavan. There is also a lot of debate in terms of this concept of Atma Mayaya. Some followers of spirituality, some followers of Dharma, they say that Atma Mayaya, as Bhagavan describes it, that his own Maya is nothing but a seeming appearance of the Lord, of the incarnation. Whereas others say that Maya is absolute reality of incarnation. So as per the Advaitic philosophy, it is the former, their seeming appearance. As per Ramanuja's philosophy, it is the latter. But I don't want to dwell, in fact, even the past a few verses, some of you have pointed out that, I've kind of glossed over them. No, I don't really mean to gloss over such aspects. From my perspective, it's honestly irrelevant to us. How does it matter? It does not matter in our, frame of thought, in our scheme of things, in terms of the learning process that we are in. And like I had said earlier, whether Bhagavan is a seeming appearance or whether Bhagavan is real, Bhagavan is Bhagavan. And if we see Bhagavan with that bhakti, then it doesn't matter. It is, as per me, irrelevant. And two, if we start debating on these aspects, it gets a little bit on a tangential form from the verse itself. The verse itself is very, very simple. When Bhagavan says, Prakritim swam adhishtaya sambhavamyayatmaya mayaya, it's so simple. Employing my own nature, I am born by my own free will. A simple, nice translation of what he has said. But we don't need to complicate it because of human ego. Simple if we have full faith. Shraddhavanto na suyanto. Full of Shraddha, full of faith, No, na suyanto, no cavilling, no questioning, no doubt expressing. If we have that, then it does not matter. If not, it's anyway irrelevant. So in today's time, continuing with this, in today's time, the word avatara, it conjures up in mind that super hit movie Avatar. And same thing happened with me when I started preparing for this session, this satsang. You know, the James Cameron movie, Avatar. And I was reminded of a statement by James Cameron. It was beautiful, and I remembered it, you know, when initially he had made it. And it was in the context that typically, normally we all believe that Avatar was a success because of jaw-dropping visuals, fantastic use of 3D animation, and the setting, this beautiful setting of Pandora, which was that moon or the planet where, you know, the inhabitants of the planet were, right? It was like a fictional biosphere that was shown. It was fantastic, beautiful nature. And Cameron says, Avatar is about finding our home, finding our family, finding our clan, and then protecting that which we have found and earn our place in it. That is why it spoke to every culture in the world. It was dealing with a universal truth of human condition that transcended culture. Very beautifully put. The only thing that I thought was missing in what he said was he had missed that aspect of dharma. And if you remember Avatar, or if you see Avatar again, you will see that this Avatar Jake went to Pandora as the Avatar. This Avatar Jake, he followed his dharma, even though there were people in in the Earth, planet Earth, who were goading him, threatening him not to do that, but he followed his dharma, and he protects the Navai tribe from their destruction, and also protects the moon Pandora. When the mining operations that were being carried out there, you know, when it started kind of impacting the biosphere, he protects the celestial body also. So we see that even in a depiction in a Hollywood movie, the Avatar was shown as performing dharma. Even though James Cameron did not put it in his own words, it was there. If you see the movie, you will see it. Sri Ramakrishna said, incarnations are all personifications of Ishvara. In the ocean of Satchitananda, a wave rises at one place at a time and is called Krishna. Another wave rises at another place a little later, and that is called Christ. A beautiful statement by Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Bhagavan now touches upon two aspects of his avatar. When and for what purpose does the infinite bind itself into a finite form? Two very famous verses that were even made even more popular by the television serial that we saw, Mahabharata. We will read verse 4.7 and 4.8 together.
Yada yada hi dharmasya
Yada yada hi dharmasya
glanirbhavati bharata
glanirbhavati bharata
abhyuttanamadharmasya
abhyuttanamadharmasya
tadatmanam srijamyaham
tadatmanam srijamyaham
paritranaya sadhunam
paritranaya sadhunam
vinashaya cha dushkritam
vinashaya cha dushkritam
dharma samsthapanarthaya
dharma samsthapanarthaya
sambhavami yuge yuge
sambhavami yuge yuge
yadha yadha hi dharmasya glanirbhavati bharata abhyuttanamadharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge.
So Bhagavan addresses Arjuna here as Bharata. Bharata means one who radiates and one who revels in wisdom. Bha means wisdom, and Ratha means one who revels in. We also saw earlier that Bharata means the descendant of the Bharata clan. But in this context, Bhagavan is referring to him as one who radiates and revels in wisdom. Wisdom of what? Dharmasya, of dharma. Dharma here reflects all aspects of dharma. We have seen this a number of times before. Righteousness, duty, God, essence of being, and all those aspects are encompassed in the reference to dharma, dharmasya. Dharma is that by which one attains purushartha. We saw in the introductory session the human goals. These purushartha are artha purushartha, kama purushartha, dharma purushartha, and moksha purushartha. The artha purushartha are necessary goals which are necessary for the human survival and for wealth creation. Food, clothing, shelter, car, plane. So those which are necessary for survival and wealth. And human beings work towards ensuring that they have it. And once they have it, they ensure what they have. Nir-yoga kshema. We read about that in chapter 2. Yoga kshema. Yoga and shema. Acquiring what you don't have, protecting what you already have. And if you have these, then you can get rid of or remove sorrows, dukkha nivriti. Kama purushartha is for entertainment, socializing, going, seeing movies, friendships, being together. That is kama purushartha. And dharma purushartha here, dharma means goodwill, punyam. I want to be a punya purush. I want to have a positive balance in my account of goodwill. That is the reference to dharma here. And kama purushartha and dharma purushartha together help human beings acquire happiness, sukha prapti. And the limitations of these goals we saw earlier are when they don't get fulfilled, there is pain, there is dissatisfaction, and there is immense dependence on these to acquire that happiness. Moksha, which is the fourth purushartha, that is complete fulfillment, liberation. Dharmasya here implies the means that will give all four to human beings. The capacity by which human beings can attain all four of these. In addition to all the other all-encompassing aspects of dharma that we have already discussed. And Bhagavan says, yada yada, whenever, in literal terms. Glanir bhavati, glanihi bhavati. Destruction happens. Destruction of what? Destruction of this dharmasya. Decaying through the yugas. And as it decays through the yugas, it goes towards destruction. Abhyutthanam. He actually yada yada should be taken along with abhyutthanam. Yada yada hi dharmasya, yada yada abhyutthanam. So whenever abhyutthanam, the rise or the prevalence of adharma, adharmasya, the fall or destruction of dharma, whenever that happens, whenever the rise, the udbhava of adharma happens. Adharma is nothing but that which prevents dharma from prevailing. And widespread prevalence of adharma, abhyutthanam, that widespread prevalence interferes with that cosmic chain that we went through. Bhagavan's cosmic order of creation. And that causes harm to creation itself. And Bhagavan says, tada tada, at those times, atmanam, by my own free will, aham srijami, I take physical form. I create a body for myself. He says, I plunge into action in your realm. In your realm meaning your realm of the three gunas, the sagunas, saguna realm. These are times when Bhagavan directly comes to planet Earth in physical form, appearing like all of us, and he supervises operations of the world directly. And this supervision has specific goals, like any leader today that we see in corporate, who is supervising the operation of his company or whatever it may be. There are specific goals that Bhagavan has when he takes the avatara. Sri Ramakrishna gives the example of a monarch, who sends a viceroy to a distant domain. Like imagine, Queen Elizabeth sending somebody to India to quell lawlessness and disorder. And Sri Ramakrishna says, an incarnation is a man of authority sent by Ishvara. He comes to put in order all lapses and deviations in the practice of dharma. And for what purpose does Bhagavan take upon himself to descend to planet Earth, to descend to Manushya Loka, to Bhuloka, in a physical form? Why does he do that? Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chadushkritam dharma sansthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Paritranaya, for the protection of sadhunam, of the noble. Vinashaya, for the destruction of. Cha vinashaya, and for the destruction of. Dushkritam, of the ignoble. And with the purpose of re-establishment of dharma. Remember, dharma is decaying. Dharma is getting destroyed. With the goal of re-establishment of dharma. Dharma sansthapanarthaya. I am born, sambhavami, yuge yuge, whenever required, in whichever time, whichever yuga, whenever there is requirement, whenever there is, I see that this destruction is leading to the destruction of the cosmic order, whenever I choose by my own free will, across yugas, I descend. So wisdom, ignorance, goodness, wickedness, all of these, they reside in the body, mind and intellect instrument. And as the population of individuals with respective traits, so whether it is goodness and wisdom or it is wickedness and ignorance with respective traits, when the population of individuals in a society increases, the society acquires these respective traits. More the wicked and ignorant people, more the wicked and ignorant society. More the good and knowledgeable people, more the good and knowledgeable society. Similarly, dharma and adharma also generate in the human heart and are reflected in the society, by the society. When adharma abounds, abhyuttanam, when it is prevalent, when it abounds, it interferes and has adverse impact on the cosmic chain. We saw earlier that the only species or the only creation of Bhagavan that actually has an impact that can affect this cosmic chain is human beings. And Bhagavan constantly goads human beings. Live in Yajna spirit, in the spirit of cooperative endeavor. First sacrifice for the cosmos, then you will receive in abundance. He says that again and again and again. On the contrary, if you start becoming a cause for destruction of the cosmic order, see, the first is a positive. The neutral would be not doing the positive. The negative would be actually causing to decay or destroy the cosmic order itself. Therefore, therefore, to safeguard dharma and destroy adharma, I enable dharmic people, the protectors of dharma, who are the sadhunam. Sadhunam are the dharmic people or the protectors of dharma, the noble people, to flourish. I enable them to flourish. Paritranaya sadhunam. Paritranaya means to flourish. And those who are destroying dharma, the adharmic people, the dushkritam, I ensure that they are destroyed. Vinashaya chadushkritam. The dushkrita or the people who are destroying dharma, I ensure that they are vinashaya, I destroy them. So Bhagwan protects dharma not as if it's an object, chain it, put it inside a vault and stand guard in front of it. He does not do it that way. He protects dharma by nourishing the abodes of dharma, the sadhus, the noble people, and by decimating the ignoble, the enemies of dharma. That is how he protects dharma. Sri Ramanujacharya, he has also established a wonderful meaning of dharma as pure devotion characterized by the worship of Lord. Just to do a quick recap, chapter 2, verse 45, Nirdvando Nitya Sattvasto Niryoga Kshemam Atmavan. Atmavan. Atmavan means the mind established in the Supreme. Chapter 2, verse 61, Tani Sarvani Samyamya Yukta Asita Matparaha. Matparaha, mind intently fixed in me. And verse 30 of chapter 3, Mai Sarvani Karmani Sanyasya Adhyatma Chetasa. Adhyatma Chetasa, the mind centered in me. Mind established in the Supreme, mind intently fixed in me, mind centered in me. He has said it thrice till now. And he will say it many, many more times, even now, today also, and going forward too. So not just because of Bhagwan saying this, Sri Ramanujacharya said that. Also because Bhagwan is extremely merciful, abundantly merciful, abundantly giving. Bhagwan's first goal is to protect dharma. That is his first goal. And if that transforms the ignoble, if that protects the creation, then that is good enough. He is happy with it. If it does not, then he addresses the ignoble. He talks to them. He reasons with them. He cautions them. He warns them. Not once, numerous times. In his infinite mercy, Bhagwan gives the ignoble innumerable chances, the dushkritam, to mend their ways. And every story, when you go back and read about Bhagwan in various avatars and various forms, you will see that. But sticking to Mahabharata, Bhagwan, for example, gave Shishupala 100 times, he promised Shishupala's mother, 100 times I will let go of his, I will not do anything. The 101st ignoble act of his, I will not be able to keep quiet. With Duryodhana, like we just said, he went to his darbar to plead for what? No war. You rule what you have to do. Give these people, Krishna was confident that even with 5 huts, the Pandavas will be able to demonstrate a proper way of living. But even that, he did not agree. Shishupala crossed 100 to go up to 101. When that happens, Vinashaya Dushkritam. At that extreme, when all his benevolence has been exhausted, that level of decay in dharmic principles. Ramanuja says the main purpose of incarnation is the revealing of his adorable form so that all may worship him. The secondary purpose is destruction of those who are opposed to the devotees. And even as he destroys the ignoble, he showers his divine mercy on them. It is said that every soul is dear to Bhagwan. And that is why in his Vishwarupa, he shows all aspects of creation. Why is Bhagwan sharing the secret now, to Arjuna and through Arjuna to everyone for the knowledge of all humankind? This Avatara Rahasya, why is he sharing that? That is covered in the next verse.
Janma karma cha me divyam.
Janma karma cha me divyam.
Evam yo veti tattvataha.
Evam yo veti tattvataha.
Tyaktva deham punarjanma.
Tyaktva deham punarjanma.
Naiti mameti sorjuna.
Naiti mameti sorjuna.
जन्म कर्म च मे दिव्यम् एवं यो वेति तत्त्वतः त्यक्त्वा देहं पुनर्जन्म नैति मामेति सोऽर्जुन.
One who knows in true light, yo veti tatvatah, who knows in true light. What? That my birth and actions are divine. Janma karma cha me divyam. Janma cha karma me, mine, divyam. My janma and karma are truly divine. Who thus knows that my birth and action are truly divine in their true nature? Tyaktva deham, having abandoned the body. Tyaktva is letting go, having abandoned the deha, the body, mind, and intellect paradigm. Naiti does not get punarjanma, rebirth. And mameti comes to me. Mameti means Sharanagati, reaches Bhagavan. A visitor to a palace can see only portions of it. But the prince of the palace has free access to all the corners, all parts of the palace. The visitor can only imagine the private chambers, how they will be. And people, when they visit palaces and all, they talk, how would it be, The private chambers are not accessible to them. Likewise, it is rather difficult to comprehend how the infinite can sport a finite form. It's a very difficult aspect, a very difficult task, immensely difficult. And Bhagavan says, those who are able to do so, they reach me. And what is the process? Just by saying that, those who are able to perceive me, those who are able to understand my avatara's true nature, they are able to reach me. Bhagavan is a lot more, like I said, kinder. He's very, very immensely benevolent. So he then describes what is the process that these people who are able to comprehend employ to understand the true nature of avatara. That's in the next verse.
वीतरागभय क्रोधा
वीतरागभय क्रोध
मन्मया मामुपाश्रिताः
मन्मया मामुपाश्रिताः
बहवो ज्ञानतपसा
भवो ज्ञानतपसा
पूता मद्भावमागताः
पूता मद्भावमागताः
वीतरागभय क्रोधा मन्मया मामुपाश्रिताः बहवो ज्ञानतपसा पूता मद्भावमागताः.
Vita. Vita means vigata. Being free, becoming free. Becoming free of what? Raga, bhaya, krodha. Raga means attachment. Bhaya means fear. Krodha means anger. Those who can comprehend the avatara, they become free of raga, bhaya, krodha. Attachment, fear, and anger. One of these actually follows the other. Bhagavan earlier had described desire in answer to Arjuna's question. He had described that desire is the one single enemy. And from desire comes the attachment to that desire. So the attachment and not getting what one is attached to, that leads to fear. That aspect of justice denied. And this fear and that feeling of justice denied, what I should be getting I have not got, that leads to anger. When the comprehension of avatara is there, the transformation occurs. What transformation? Of becoming free of these three aspects. Raga, Bhaya and Krodha. How does it happen? We all think about it. Even Bhagavan in his avatar went through so many trials and tribulations. Like Lord Rama, the prince who was living like an ascetic. If Rama can do it, what should I be afraid or angry of? Bhagavan always protects, like Lord Narasimha protected Prahalada throughout his life. When Lord Narasimha, when Bhagavan is there, when he is protecting, then why should I be afraid or angry? So that reasoning happens within us when we comprehend the avatara. This is one very important purpose or goal of the avatara, to teach human beings through his own example, through Bhagwan's own example. Personification of how to deal with trials and tribulations, how to set an ideal, how to be sensitive to creation, how to be benevolent to fellow creatures, how to live with the spirit of cooperative endeavor, the Yajna spirit, how to preserve the cosmos, all of this. And by doing all this repeatedly again and again and again throughout his avataric life, Bhagwan creates love and respect in the hearts of humans for him. And we saw earlier, love belongs to the heart, respect belongs to the intellect. When they two come together, there is devotion, bhakti. So by being such an ideal, by leading life and setting such an example, he creates devotion among people. The Hare Rama, Hare Krishna bhajan that we play in the beginning of the satsang, okay, the Gita Dhyana Shloka, beginning of the satsang again, every time, that does nothing but channel our mind. Otherwise, at least my mind is dealing with hundreds of nonsensical things in life. Seriously. And when you do that for 2, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, the results are amazing. And when you do the satsang, the result is even more amazing. When you go through the teachings of Bhagwan, the positivity that it results in, the slightly longer, extended happiness, deeper happiness. Remember the Parama Purushartha. Ultimate happiness is deep happiness that touches the core, and long happiness that is prevalent all the time. So when we do these kind of things, we experience that longer happiness. We experience that deeper happiness. For me, at least for 4 days after, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is good. It passes well. And then, I have to prepare for the next satsang. So, that takes care of, to ensure that I don't go back to the nonsense. So the preparation work starts. Each one of us has to find a way to keep sanity in this crazy world. And when we achieve that, we feel that immense satisfaction, the longer and the deeper happiness. And this achievement is nothing but attaining his state that Bhagwan talks about. He will talk about reaching his feet. So the avatara duty is to build devotion in Bhagwan. Manmaya mam, absorbed in me. Mam upashritaha, taking refuge in me. He uses mam once, manmaya mam upashritaha. But it's being absorbed in me, taking refuge in me. That is Sharanagati. Manmaya mam upashritaha is equal to Sharanagataha. And Jnana Tapasa, by the knowledge that comes from austerity. Tapas is nothing but ascetic practice. Rama demonstrated how to live the life of an ascetic. Tapas is ascetic practice that is voluntarily carried out, not forced, to achieve purification. And Jnana Tapasa. Jnana Tapasa is what? Same ascetic practice to remove ignorance and attain knowledge. In this context, what is this knowledge that comes through this tapasa? That knowledge of comprehending an avatar. That knowledge. And these three together, which three together? Manmaya mam. Manmaya mam is being absorbed in me. Mam upasritaha, taking refuge in me. Jnana tapasa, which is nothing but by the knowledge that comes from austerity, austeritic practices. These three together lead to purification. Puta. Puta means purification. And thus purified, bhavo agataha madbhava. Bhavo, bhavaha means many people the great Mahatmas, agataha, have attained my state, madbhavam. My state, my nature. So one point that has come up in our satsang repeatedly, a couple of times at least, is Arjuna is lucky. He had Bhagavan Sri Krishna as Guru. How do we find a Guru? It's so hard to find a Guru. What do we do when we do not find a Guru? How does one find a right Guru? What happens if time is passing by and I have not found a Guru? These questions have come up, you'll all remember. Here's your answer. Manmaya mam upashritaha jnana tapasa. That's the answer. When you don't find a Guru, you do this, Bhagavan becomes your Guru. Taking refuge in Bhagavan, being absorbed in Bhagavan, and dwelling in the knowledge like tapasa, attempting to comprehend the avatara. When we do these three things, Bhagavan himself becomes the Guru. Tapas is nothing but, it is said, tapasaha kashmalam hanti. Tapas removes dirt. Kashmalam is dirt. Remember chapter 2, beginning, when Krishna started, he started by admonishing Arjuna. He said, your mind is full of dirt, kashmalam. The greatest dirts are doubt and lack of faith and ignorance. Doubt or lack of faith and ignorance. These are the two greatest doubts. And that's why Bhagavan says, Shraddhavanto nasuyanto. Manmaya mam upashritaha. These two, they lead to removal of lack of faith. Faith returns. That is nothing but Sharanagati. You need immense faith to do Sharanagati. And Jnana Tapasa removes ignorance. And the resulting purification leads to liberation. So a question that comes up now is, what about those who do not have this comprehension, who are not able to comprehend the avatara as in Bhagavan? Bhagavan anticipates this question and provides the answer in the next verse.
Ye yata mam prapadyante
Ye yatha mam prapadyante
tam tataiva bhajamyaham
tans tathaiva bhajamyaham
mama vartmanu vartante
mama vartmanu vartante
manushya partha sarvashah
manushya partha sarvashah
ye yata mam prapadyante tam tataiva bhajamyaham mama vartmanu vartante manushya partha sarvashah.
Ye yatha mam prapadyante. Whoever they may be, and in whatever manner they approach me, they connect with me. Tans tathaiva bhajamyaham. In that manner itself, I bless them. Bhajamyaham, aham, I, bhajami, I bless, I reward. Whenever one approaches me, seeking solution for their day-to-day life problems or beyond life problem, oh Bhagavan, I'm looking for a promotion, please grant me. Oh Bhagavan, please, I'm approaching thee, give me liberation, give me moksha, whatever it may be. If they approach me, I bless them. And what about those humans, Manushya, who go to other gods and deities? Because we humans classify gods, various gods. He says Sarvashaha, in all ways, whichever way they choose to reach me. Mama Vartmanu Vartante. As long as they follow my path, O Partha. Anuvartante is treading or following my path. Anuvartante is follow. Vartma is my path. So as long as they follow my path, whichever way they follow, whichever way they approach, it does not matter. Through whoever they approach, does not matter. There is a small shloka that goes something like Akashat pratitam toyam yada gacchati sagaram sarvadeva namaskaram keshavam prati gacchati. As the water that flows from the skies, this way or that way or whichever way, ultimately reaches the ocean. Similarly, worship of all gods, deities, any kind of worship, whichever way it is performed, reaches Bhagwan, comes to me. Why is it then, if this is the case, we see people around us seeking quick results in all their actions, including worship? If Bhagwan is so accessible, if Bhagwan gives liberation, if you approach him, if it appears so easy, why do people perform actions to fulfill particular desires? You perform this yajna, like as in fire sacrifice. I don't mean the yajna means, the cooperative endeavor. I'm not talking about Bhagwan Krishna's yajna. I'm talking about the fire sacrifice that is there in the karma kanda of the Vedas. Do this sacrifice, you will get this reward. Do that sacrifice, you will get that reward. So why do people do that? Why do people perform specific aspects, sacrifices, actions with specific results in mind? Why do they do that? Bhagwan answers that in the next verse.
Kankshanta karmanam siddhim
Kankshanta karmanam siddhim
yajanta iha devataha
yajanta iha devataha
Shipram himanushe loke
Shipram himanushe loke
Siddhir bhavati karmaja
Siddhir bhavati karmaja
Kankshanta karmanam siddhim Yajanta iha devataha Shipram himanushe loke Siddhir bhavati karmaja.
Kankshataha, longing for, seeking. What? Siddhim, fulfillment, success, favorable result. From what? Karmanam, from actions. Iha yajante devataha, people in this world. Iha is in this world, people. People is implied. Yajante, worship, devataha, various gods. He siddhir bhavati, because siddhir, he is because. Siddhir bhavati, satisfaction is attained. Shipram, quickly. Satisfaction is attained quickly. Manushe, by humans. Karmaja loke, from actions in this world. Loke here implies in this world of objects. From actions in this world of objects, the human beings are able to attain quick satisfaction. And because of that, they perform actions longing for these results that they have imagined. And they worship various gods for the same. Anything that provides sustained benefit is harder to attain. It requires patience, it requires dogged effort over a period of time. And that then results in long-lasting happiness. That is one of the results that come from such patient effort. However, actions that lead to immediate gratification, a sense of joy, those are the ones that are sought after. I often tell my team members, do not sacrifice the long term for short term gain. Oftentimes, even when we are working every day, we'll say, just we are getting this, let's secure it. But sometimes we ignore, or sometimes we don't understand that securing that short term joy actually costs the long term happiness. Sharanagati is not easy to attain. Asking Bhagwan for the true goal of spirituality, that is moksha, that is difficult to relate to. People don't understand, they don't relate to it first of all. Then they effort to get it. So why bother? The benefit of being religious, performing various rituals, that is visible. But the focus on spirituality, a path of spiritual pursuit, that is blurred, not very clear. So people will say, let's go to Tirupati, let's put such and such a thing inside the hundi, we will get such a thing. Bhagavan will bless in return. People don't even realize that they are saying go to Tirupati. They actually have to go to Tirumalai, not to Tirupati. The Bhagavan they are seeking is sitting in Tirumalai, not in Tirupati. That they say go to Tirupati. Wear a black cloth, practice abstinence, walk to the temple, Bhagavan will give you this reward. He will fulfill all your desires. At least for some time. Hopefully that will happen, if not for a longer period of time. I wished for a small jackfruit, I got a big one. God is so kind. Okay, I wanted a promotion that I talked about, that I've been desiring for so long. I've been working so hard for it. I didn't get it. Does he even care? He doesn't even bother about my, even though I worship him every day. So 2-minute noodles to crash course in stress management. Do a 2-day course, 1-day course. Great. I'll be free of stress. That makes sense to me. Bhagavad Gita, 26 months. Okay. I'll think about it. How can I be Vita Raga Bhaya Krodha, free of attachment, fear, anger? That will not happen to me. Not in this Janma. Forget it. So why worry about it? What takes time but gives true, long-lasting, fulfilling result is what is needed. But where is the patience? In 9th grade, you start worrying about the 10th grade. In 10th grade, you start worrying about the 12th grade exam. In 12th grade, you start worrying about engineering, medicine, architecture, fashion design, which will give me more money, which will give me better prestige in my surroundings. And then marriage, and then how to get out of the marriage. So, once I was listening to this, one of the very good storytellers is Gaur Gopal Das. I was listening to him and he spoke about this Bollywood song. It's beautiful actually. Zindagi ka safar hai ye kaisa safar, koi samjha nahi, koi jana nahi. ऐसे जीवन भी हैं जो जिए ही नहीं, जिनको जीने से पहले ही मौत आ गई. फूल ऐसे भी हैं जो खिले ही नहीं, जिनको खिलने से पहले फिजा खा गई. So people are living like this. In this Manushya Loka, people are enticed to perform action for immediate results. And that includes worship of this Bhagavan, who is trying to tell us in various ways through the Bhagavad Gita what all wrong things we do, even in his name. Inner transformation takes time. The action to be performed for inner transformation, Bhagavan has told us, that is not inner engineering. That is Karma Yoga. Bhagavan will discuss this further in the following verses, in the next few verses, which we will cover in the next satsang. Thank you. Hari Om.
Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.
Thank you. Hari Om. We'll wait for questions, thoughts, comments.
I have 2 questions.
Yes, sir.
One is that what is the incentive for people who are doing this adharmic activities? Yeah? So why? I mean, we understand people following the path of dharma. So you are going toward moksha step by step. But why people are involved in? I mean, they must have something which is enticing them toward them. Yeah, there must be some force. Yeah, this is. And the second question I have is yada yada hi dharmasya, right?
Right.
So the God is saying in every yuga I will come and re-establish the dharma. But if you look at it, yuga after yuga, dharma is getting lesser and lesser. So at some level, he's unsuccessful in establishing it or re-establishing it. He gives lessons and he does that, but somehow it looks like it's not resetting in some way. So again, related to the first question, yeah, I think there is a drift here. There is a certain, what is it called, destiny in this whole thing. Um, there is the way things are supposed to be predetermined. So what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. First thought, when you ask these kind of complicated questions, ask one at a time. Now, the first one, okay? The first one you're saying, what is the incentive for people to perform adharmic activities? That's the reason we talked about the human goals. That's where the connection to goals come in, okay? So, what are the goals? Artha Purushartha, Kama Purushartha, Dharma Purushartha and Moksha Purushartha. One of them leads to Dukkha Nivritti or removal of sorrow. Two others lead to Sukha Prapti or attainment of happiness. Forget about Moksha. Most people, the people who are adharmic, are reveling in the first three goals. So what can I do to achieve my Artha goals? Once my survival Artha goals are done, I want my pleasure Artha goals. Before I go to pleasure, once my survival Artha goals are done, I want my wealth creation. Survival is done. I'm happy, I'm surviving, but I need to accumulate wealth now. Now, if I accumulate wealth at the cost of somebody else not surviving, it's okay, it's fine. Then it comes to pleasure, Kama. I have survived, I have accumulated wealth, now let me indulge. So the adharmic people are essentially operating in these three realms. That is their incentive. They are not even thinking about moksha. That is why it is irrelevant to them. It doesn't matter. Shraddhavanto, Asuyanto, how is it relevant? It's not even relevant in their dictionary or in their way of life. So that is their incentive. The people who are leaning towards moksha are the ones who have the incentive for living a righteous life. They are the ones who try to understand what dharma is and then follow and then try to comprehend the nature of avatara and finally reach Bhagavan. That is the answer to your first question. Both, thank you, are brilliant questions. Okay. And the second one was that Bhagavan is, he is doing this yuga after yuga, but is he really succeeding? Is that right? Did I express your question well? Otherwise, you can interrupt in between.
Yes.
Yeah. Is he really succeeding? Deepak, you are an engineer. Okay. This is like saying we try to write code again and again and we do it, revise it, do quality check and rewrite it. But ultimately the quality sucks when it goes to the customer. Okay. So, see, it is we, the people. Bhagavan has built this cosmic chain, which in itself is absolutely pristine. And he also prescribes that what you need to do for it to maintain at the level of that, not just survival, but flourishing, where all aspects of creation can flourish. Not just survive, not just be there, not just live in this world, but flourish. And that is where he talks about the yajna spirit. How is it that we give to others and then receive? But we human beings, the minute Bhagwan comes as an avatar, establishes a pristine world for us to live in, shows by example how you should live, and then we start spoiling it from the next day onwards. And that cycle repeats. And that is the reason why yuga after yuga, they say that the deterioration, finally after Kali Yuga, ultimate pralaya, then it goes back, to the day of Lord Brahma. All 4 yugas occur within the day of Lord Brahma. When the night time of Lord Brahma comes, everything goes. Then finally again Satya Yuga starts. And over a period of time, again, human beings slowly and steadily. Even if you see our avatara, the old avataras spent very less time on earth. The later avatars have to spend an entire lifetime on earth, because even for Bhagwan in his avatar form, takes a long time to set this world right. Lord Narasimha emerged from a pillar, did his job, went back to his, to his Vishnu Loka. But Krishna and Rama had to be here for an entire lifetime. Krishna is said to have lived more than 130 odd years. So the more the decay, the avatar also has to spend more time on planet Earth. And still we come back very quickly. You're on mute.
To me, it sounds like this IIT entrance exam. There are a number of seats God has, and whoever qualifies.
The number of IITs also got added.
So, once the number of seats are finished, God collapses the world. And then next year, next cycle begins.
If so many seats had been there and IITs had been there, I would have been in IIT. In my time.
Yeah, you mean to say we would have been batchmates?
Yeah.
So I have a question, Srini. What you have said is that God comes in avatar form to the earth, and they lead a life which humans are supposed to follow. And they set the example for us how to follow, what to do, what not to do. Now, you also said that if God can do it, he can live a life of human. We should think that why can't we do it, right? So in Ramayana, Ram accepts Sita back into his life even after she has lived with, spent time in Sri Lanka. And it was one Dhobi, if you remember, who says that he's God. He can accept his wife back. I'm human, I cannot. So even in avatar form, God has advantages. He's doing things because he's God. He's the avatar of God. He can live that kind of life. Ram is because everybody, like we say that the way Ram has lived his life is because he was God. That is how he could do so much and he could lead that kind of a life. But for a human to lead that kind of a life is practically not possible.
So are you okay? Yeah. So what you're asking something?
Yeah, I'm saying that God is doing all those things in the human form because he is God. We cannot.
So let me, one thing, first of all, I never said that if God can take avatar form and be like humans, humans can be like God. I didn't say that. I just said that Bhagwan sets an example for people to follow. See, he shows how people, so Bhagwan Ram set an example for people to live, okay, throughout his life in terms of how to do his duties, and not just as God. He showed people how to do duties as a human being. And that is why he lived as a human being. Whenever required during the avatar's form, it's a must that being Bhagwan is able to take certain actions to ensure that the cycle goes in the way it is meant to go. For example, when he had to cross the ocean, he had to assume the form of a Bhagwan and say, create the path, otherwise I'm going to destroy you. As a human being, he could not have done that. Okay, he had to, but he showed in variety of numerous ways how a human being should live an ideal life. Now, coming to your specific example, so the episode was that Bhagwan goes back to Ayodhya, and one of the subjects he talks about how Rama, the king, can accept his wife after she has been, in Ravana's place. Okay, and he would not be able to do that. He had to throw his wife out. At that time, what did Bhagwan do and what did Sita do? So if you have read Ramayana, Rama never ever wanted to let Sita go to the forest. She went to the forest and that's where Lavakusha were born and all that, right? But he never wanted that. But he was torn between the duty of a husband and duty of a king. And which is the duty that impacts the humanity more? It is the duty of the king that impacts the humanity more. So to set an example of righteous leadership, both he and Sita made that sacrifice. Actually, Rama was, it is said to be one of the worst times of Lord Rama, where he went through immense pain and, he went through a lot of humanly discomfort and humanly pain at that stage. Because he could not bring himself up to tell Sita to leave. Sita, when she discovered, Rama never shared with her. But obviously Sita, Lakshmana, everybody could figure out that something was wrong. When she discovered, when she found out for herself, she made a supreme sacrifice again of leaving. That is so the Ramayana is like that, where Rama and Sita, especially Sita in this case, followed by Rama, made that sacrifice of leaving the palace and going so that, leadership could be preserved, so that followership could be encouraged. So yeah, sometimes human beings are expected to do those kind of sacrifices. So Rama did not live like a man, and man is not supposed to emulate. Man is supposed to emulate Rama by not telling his wife to leave. But Sita left. So a woman is supposed to emulate Sita by doing that if that situation arises. Both of them demonstrated exemplary ideal behavior.
Yeah, to Upasana's question, I think it was not, the Dhobi did not say it is the God who is doing. It was, he said king. As a king he can, so not as a God. Like what is happening
A king like Ram, because Ram was known as the perfect son, the perfect king. He was supposed to be a perfect human being in the eyes of people.
Right.
That was it.
In this case,
they were not referring him as a god. Yeah, they were referring him as a king. The powerful. It's like what is happening now in Maharashtra. The people in power, they are misusing their power, right? So this is what he's saying. Dhobi is saying that the people in power are misusing their powers.
Right.
So from your narrative, he did not say he is a god. He said he is a king. He is a powerful king, so he can do this.
But see, the point remains that whatever the Dhobi said, Sita demonstrated the ideal way of living, and Rama followed in this case. Rama did not say, I am the husband, shut up, and I will decide. I am the king, I will decide. Neither did he say that to the Dhobi, I am the king, I'll do what I please, like Shiv Sena does today. Nor did he say to the wife that I am the husband, you will obey me and not do your own. She got up and said, I need to do this in this situation. And that is for us to follow. So the lesson that we should look from these kind of stories is, what is the lesson that is being told for us to follow? That is what is relevant to us.
Namaskar. Hi, Srini.
Yeah,
Uh,
hello.
Hi. I have one question. It's like the age-old debate which goes on the line Yajanta Iha Devata. So, in this verse, Bhagavan says that people worship some demigods for their fruitive actions. And so, although in the Bhagavad it's always written, right, that all gods are the same. Nitya Nityanam. Nityo Nityanam, if I'm not wrong. But why is there this comparison? And if you go from the from the Bhagavad Gita to the Srimad Bhagavatam, there is this 12th canto, I believe, where it's written that there is a line there which compares, just like Ganga is the Nimna Ganga Ganam Yatha Ganga Devanam Achyuto Yatha Vaishwanam Yatha Shambhu Puranam Idat Dihata Idam Tatha, which means that Ganga is the greatest of all rivers, Lord Achyuta is the greatest of all deities, Shambhu is the greatest of all Vaishnavas, and Bhagavad Puranam is the greatest of all Puranas. So why is Vishnu being given the deity position and Shiva being given the Vaishnava position? Wherein if you go to the Shiva Purana, they say that Shiva is the ultimate deity. So why is there this conflict here, that who is the bigger deity?
So that actually, you know what? By the way, Bhagavan doesn't say that, that you worship demigods. If you read the verse, it's our interpretation. That is why I don't get into too much of interpretation. Straight verse meaning is the best for us to import. The minute you start reading into verse, what Bhagavan is saying, that is where all these fault lines creep in. So if you read the word, Bhagavan does not talk about demigods. Bhagavan does not say. Okay? Bhagavan just says that whichever way you worship, you come to me. You think of me as Shiva, I am Shiva. You think of me as Vishnu, I am Vishnu. You think of me as Krishna, I am Krishna. You think of me as Son, I am Son. You think of me as Christ, I am Christ. You think of me as Allah, I am Allah. You whichever way you come to me, you follow my path, you tread my path, I will embrace you, I will accept you. Very, very simple statement. He does not do a hierarchy analysis at all. Hierarchy is coming from all of us, our interpretations, based on our ego, the human ego.
Makes sense. May not in this shloka, okay, here the interpretation can be wrong, but the one that I quoted, where it's written that Vaishnava Yatha Shambhu, that Shambhu is the ultimate Vaishnava. So ultimately Vaishnava are derived from Vaishnav, right?
That is why Kushagra, the verse that you are quoting will not say Sri Bhagavan Vacha.
Okay.
So here it is Sri Bhagavan. Bhagavan is saying this. That is why Bhagavad Gita is still acknowledged as one of the purest texts to learn from. Because there is a lot of text which has been made to suit individual selfish purposes. If I want to promote an ideology, see, ideologies are meant not to glorify God. Ideologies are meant to glorify the founder of that specific sect. So if the founder of a specific sect is promoting a certain ideology, all the text written is to promote that ideology. Bhagavan never indulges in ideology. Entire Bhagavad Gita, you will not find Bhagavan indulging in ideology. Straight shooter, to the point, very crystal clear. The minute we start interpreting, all these problems come.
Yeah, and just one thing. So if ultimately our normal human mind needs someone's interpretation to get the gist of the Uvacha as well, right? So whoever is interpreting it, it's ultimately an interpretation. Be it an interpretation of the Gita Press, be it an interpretation of Swami Chinmayananda. But ultimately it's an interpretation, right?
Sure. So look at it 180-degree opposite. Okay. If you sincerely, consciously abandon, tyaktva, okay, sincerely, consciously abandon, let go of this attachment to a concept, and you evaluate the verse, your inner God will answer that question, whether it is clean and pure or whether it is not. So when you go through these, that we have to. There's no sabha or there's no satsang in which we can sit and discuss. Within our mind, within the inside God that is there within us, the divinity that is there within us, we need to ask that divinity, that inner dialogue, where we say, So 180-degree opposite, if that inner God is telling us that, hey, don't you think this is clouded by your attachment to Shiva? Or see, attachment can be to anything. No, attachment can be to Raga, Bhaya, Krodha, or attachment can be to Shiva, Vishnu, Indra, XYZ, ABC, Christ, whoever it may be. So Bhagavan says, Vita, Raga, Bhaya, Krodha, all kinds of attachment. And, in me, you devote, you take refuge in me. Now that refuge in me, it's that God, that ultimate real God. And if we can let go of attachment, we will find that ultimate real God. If we are still clinging to that attachment, we will not find it.
Perfect, makes sense. It is just, they say that the difference between a conversation and an argument is just this, that conversation everyone benefits and argument no one benefits. So it's just a conversation that way deriving out of some thought. One on similar lines. So in the previous verses, we were discussing about desire and how desire is not good because it leaves the rasa. But ultimately the desire to self-realization, the desire for the Bhagwan is also a desire.
Yes.
So on one end, we were having a pessimistic approach to desire, and on the other end, ultimately we need desire to progress in our spiritual path. So
Yes.
how is the analogy of the word desire to be treated?
Yeah. So actually it is there, in Sadhana Chatushtayam, when you say Viveka, Vairagya, Samadhi, Shatka, Sampatti, Mumukshutva. Mumukshutva is the desire for the ultimate. That is the term for the desire for seeking Bhagwan. But the desire for seeking Bhagwan needs to transform into devotion. Once the desire to seek Bhagwan transforms into devotion, then the desire goes away completely. That is the sublimation of the desire. Devotion leads to sublimation of the desire. As long as that does not happen, the desire remains, and you're looking for fruit, result. You're attached to the result of that desire. But the desire to God, the result of that desire is devotion. And devotion is nothing but Sharanagati. So then there is nothing.
Yeah. Makes sense. Thank you. Answer that.
Thank you. Jyoti had written a text, but basically she is saying, one second. But what she's saying is the other side. What you said is one side, this is the other side. Shiva is greatest devotee of Vishnu. My point is, Shiva, if for me Bhagwan, Sri Krishna is Bhagwan, Shiva is part of him. If for me Shiva is Bhagwan, Krishna is part of him. That's what Bhagwan is also saying. If you see me as Shiva, you will reach me. If you see me as Krishna, you will reach me.
Yeah.
If you see me as Christ, yeah. So who is devotee? Whether Shiva is devotee of Vishnu or Vishnu is devotee of Shiva is highly irrelevant.
Exactly. The reason I asked is because before reading the Bhagavata, I had read the Shiv Purana. Okay. There it was written that Shiva Ajaya hai, Ajanma hai. Neither Shiva has ever been defeated, neither Shiva was ever born. Shiva was there. So that's because our realization of, who is bigger, who is smaller, who is more capable, who is less capable, comes by certain parameters of, of power, of succession. So there it was written that there is no succession. So that is where this question came from. But I do understand that Srimad Bhagavatam is an interpretation of a religious sect founder and stuff, and that is the reason this is coming from. So that's completely understandable.
Any other thought?
Just to, I today shared one interesting take on the same subject. Yeah, manifested form and unmanifested form, and what Kushagra is here saying is basically, I mean, it's mentioned in an indirect way there, saying that Shiva is why Shiva is great or considered the greatest, because he is that unmanifested form of the energy or whatever. Yeah, and the process of manifested into the unmanifested is the process of unlimited, going from the limited realm into the unlimited realm. So that is what makes him the Mahadev, because he deals with this realm of, when we say destruction actually from the limitations of the, that manifested form into the unmanifested. So I mean, but this is also a interpretation or take on the subject. Yeah, but I thought it was very, very relevant to today's discussion. Yeah, what Kushagra brought up. Yeah.
Sure. I have not yet looked at it. I need to.
No, thank you. Yeah, there's, because let's not get into the Srimad Bhagavatam bit, because there in one verse which I mentioned, it's written on the Vaishnava front of Shiva. On the other verse, it is also written that Shiva is the eternal Brahman, because in that verse it is explained that how he exhibits the qualities of a Brahman, but irrelevant to this because of the fact that, as you said, that there is a uvacha and there is a interpretation. So that's why pausing it there. But someday when the time is right, we can have a debate on this, definitely.
Kushagra, again, one point I disagree. Yeah, Shiva is without quality. Yeah.
Yeah, I am not saying that. I just read the part of the Bhagavatam.
Has this quality.
Absolutely, I'm not saying that. I'm saying it was written in the Bhagavatam. I'm quoting the shloka. That was the take of it. So yeah, that's all.
So Anu's comment here in chat, I'm trying to understand duty and sacrifice. Sometimes when someone makes sacrifice, someone else is denied justice in the context of Sita. Honestly, I don't understand this, because Sita made sacrifice. Are you saying Rama was denied justice? Or
no, so I'm trying to say, for example, the Lava Kusha, right? They were the princes and they were supposed to be brought up in a specific way, and they were kind of denied the kind of the support from both parents, right? I mean, Rama was not there when they were brought up. So Sita's sacrifice kind of affected their children, right?
But it probably affected in a positive way, no? They were on the verge of, actually defeating their own father. If they had been brought up under their father, that would have never happened. So, so the positive way to look at it is that sacrifice made. See, the point is, we are not impacting any other human being. Okay, that if we think that way, I think it is. It's probably one of the tremendous follies in us when we think that because of me, somebody else did well. It is because of them that they did well, or him or her that they did well, or they did poorly, or whatever. We don't have much of influence, say anything in that context. So, into your comment, if at all there was an impact of Sita's sacrifice, it looks like it was very positive, because as Kshatriya, when Rama did the yajna, the Ashwamedha yajna, they were on the verge of beating him, and Sita and Hanuman had to come in between and stop Lava and Kusha from. They defeated everyone else. Finally, Rama, their father, came, and they were on the verge of beating him. So even in that sense, it was a positive thing.
How can
Yeah,
it be a positive beating their own father? And
As a Kshatriya, at that time he was not their father. At that time he was a king who had performed that yajna. They didn't even know that he was the father. Okay, so the biggest king, the Rama, King Rama, like you said, right? So these two young boys would have beat him, but for
rather, Sita was most disturbed at that time because she knew that he's the father and they are going against their own father.
I am saying something very simple and clear. Try to identify what Bhagavan is saying in all the various texts that we go through. Okay, to prove to yourself, not to anybody else, to prove to ourselves inside us that that is indeed what Bhagavan is saying. Ask the Bhagavan within us. If it makes sense, then it probably is true. Without any attachment. Because attachment will lead to bhaya, bhaya will lead to krodha. So without any attachment, giving up all the attachment.
And also without any doubts, with complete faith. That's also very important.
That is the next one, taking refuge in Bhagavan. Shraddhavanto Nasivanto is the previous, but then taking refuge in Bhagavan, fully absorbed in Bhagavan, getting into the knowledge completely through that element of, tapas. That's it. If we do that, like I said, we don't need any guru, we don't need any text, we don't need any interpretation. This is good enough. We lead our life like this. Bhagavan himself will be the guru. Or Bhagavan herself will be the guru, to be fair to Sita. Okay, if any other point, otherwise. Okay, if nothing else, then Hari Om, we'll meet next Saturday. Hari Om, thank you all.